What's up, everybody? So I'm going to be making a video today about showing you guys how I do stamps on things like my pendants that I've made. So I've got little pendants that I've made out of like nuts and bolts and things like that. And I'm going to be applying stamps to those so that they will say what the customer would like them to say. And I'm going to use these pendants as a way of showing you how to apply stamps to really any piece of steel. And I'm going to be using stamps that are only about 3 millimeters in height. So they're going to be really small, but that works for these because these aren't very big. So all you need for it is your stamp set, whatever you're stamping, a pretty good solid surface, and a decent hammer. This is a 32-ounce ball peen. So first thing, you're going to need a nice solid surface. And if you're going to be smithing, chances are you're going to take the time to invest in something at least equivocal to an anvil. You need a hard surface because it's going to allow you to transfer into something like metal better. Now these are stainless steel. They're not like an anvil type steel. They're not magnetic, but they stamp just fine anyway. And we're going to be doing cold stamping. A lot of videos I see elsewhere on YouTube and on Facebook, people get things really hot and then stamp it. That is a way to do it. I tend to do it cold stamping because for me I like the feel of doing it that way. So first things first, I need to make sure that the word that's going to go across the top is center. And I've already centered out a hole here for where the loop for the necklace is going to go. So I'm going to use that as the center point where the middle of the word needs to be positioned. And the first word up top is a 7-letter word. So we're going to take the middle letter of the word and put it directly underneath this little hole. And that letter happens to be E. And so on the stamp, you want to make sure that you pay attention to how the letter is aligned, what direction it's facing, because if you face it the wrong way, it'll show. And some, if you face them the wrong way, they'll be upside down. So pay attention to what direction it's facing as you set it down. And then notice, because sometimes when you buy stamps, the letter isn't totally straight with the rest of the stamp. So make sure that when you're setting it down, that you are paying attention to the stamp itself and not necessarily what you're holding. The letter on the stamp is more important than the stamp itself. So you need to make sure that that is straight. So I'm going to check myself here and start on this first one. And we're going to take and line it up so that it's got a decent amount of distance in between that hole and the center hole. Kind of check myself, and I'm going to hold it tight, and I need to be careful and hold it low so that I don't smack myself in the knuckles with the hammer. You got to be pretty accurate about this. And I would actually recommend lowering your hand a bit so that you have a bit better clearance. And you need to kind of hold the stamp really still and pretty firm. Otherwise, the stamp may move on you when you strike it, and you could end up smacking your fingers. So we're going to go ahead and drop this letter E right here in the middle. Okay, so this is the result after that one good smack. This is what the letter looks like. You'll notice that the bottom of the E here is a little more shallow than the top and the middle of the E. So to correct that, I'm going to have to reset my stamp into that slot that it has created. Okay, so as I just said, the bottom of the E here is not quite set as deep as I would like it to be. I'd like to kind of set that letter in there a little bit more. So what I need to do is I need to reline up my stamp. And I do this by kind of feeling it out. You can feel it kind of click into place, and probably won't be able to hear it, but I'll be really quiet and we'll see. Nope, but I'm locked into place. I am now able to actually shy of turn the pendant with it. I can feel it locked in place there. You see me turn the pendant? So I know I'm locked into place when I can do that. So I'm just going to kind of set it back in there, kind of feel it drop in, and then just give it one more good thump. And now the E is set in there nice. Okay, so now that you've seen me actually set the stamp, let me talk a little bit about how hard you have to swing the hammer to set the stamp into something like stainless, or you can stamp things like brass or steel, or really almost whatever you want. In stamping something like steel or stainless, you are going to need to set the stamp with a decent amount of pressure. And it's probably going to be, for the average person, a little outside your initial comfort range, because you do need to strike it fairly hard. It's not something, because the material is hard and dense, you need to be able to make sure that you can set that in there as much as possible in one strike. Otherwise, you're going to be trying to search for a really shallow stamp, and you're not going to be able to lock into it as easily, because there's not going to be as much to lock into. So the first time that you strike that, you're going to want to make sure that you're in the right place, because once you strike it, it's there. If you end up bouncing the stamp, you'll leave 2 marks. And then when you go to try to stamp it again, you'll have to make sure that you don't inadvertently stamp that second mark that's incorrect. The only way to get rid of that then is to sand that blemish that you've created. So when you do this, you need to be very sure of what you're doing and practice before you do it on something you're going to give to someone else, I would recommend. So when you go to stamp it, you're going to set your stamp in there, and you're going to set it down on there nice and firm. And then get your fingers, hold it down as well as you can and as firm as you can, and away from the top of it, so that your hammerhead has some clearance between it and your fingers. And you're going to need to strike it fairly hard, and try to strike it as flat as possible, so that you don't inadvertently, say, like, launch your stamp across the room, or miss and strike your fingers instead. It is something that when you go to do it for the first time, it's nerve-wracking, because you're bound to miss a couple of times. I know I have. So, but when you go to do it, you do need to kind of swing fairly hard and confidently. So practice on something relatively soft, or a softer material if you have it, and then move into something like steel when you know you have the accuracy and the strength to really set something with depth and purpose the first time you swing. And that is my recommendation on your hammer swing as far as that goes. So now let's finish up these stamps. So this first word here had 7 letters in it. It's an odd number. So you have a letter that's going to be right in the middle. So it's fairly easy to line that up. You find the middle letter and you line it up with the middle. The next word that we're going to have down here is only 4 letters. So now we have to line that up differently. There is no central letter, so you have to line the space in between the 2 middle letters up so that they fit and look symmetrical on both sides. So one way you can do that with something like this, find yourself a straight edge. And on this, because it's got 6 sides here, we're able to go from corner to corner and know that we're pretty well down the center. And then we can take something like a nail and just kind of scratch a small line where the center of that goes through. Something that light sanding will take off. Something just enough to see, but not enough to actually cause a blemish. So then something like this small, the trick then is to do it without moving your piece. So you apply some pressure, get yourself a good scratch going on there so that it's just enough to see. And then you space your letters on either side of that. So now we've got these stamps all completed and ready to go. They're now ready to be taken and have brass filled into the stamps with a little bit of brass transfer, which will be my next video, and showing you how to complete these with a little bit of brass to make those stamps stand out a little bit. That's a little bit about how I do the cold stamping. And to just kind of wrap up this little video here, the reason I do cold stamping for things like this, and even things like blades, is sometimes when steel or other metals are hot and you go to stamp them, you can create extra displacement of steel that you probably don't want. And it's a lot easier to do that. If the steel is cold, yeah, you do have to hit it a bit harder, and the chance of making a mistake is a little bit higher. But it is a lot lower of a chance of you completely deforming a section of the steel, because it is significantly less malleable at a cold, touchable temperature than it would be if it were, say, even like a dull red-orange heat in temperature. So that is what we did. That's how I do these little pendants. That's how I do the little square pendants. That's how I do these, and even up to blades, including swords with certain stamps. Rather than do them hot, I do them cold to prevent warping. I've got a pretty steady hand, and I've gotten pretty good at it. I've practiced it quite a bit, so I'm fairly confident doing things cold and can do them relatively quickly. So that's how we do the stamps on these, and the next video for you guys will be how to fill those stamps with brass and then clean the surface and leave the brass in the stamps.